Welcome to Edupedia World. Well, in this tutorial, we'll continue learning about cloning in Java. So let's begin. Okay, in our previous tutorial, we have seen what is cloning and how to do that. We have already studied in summary what is shallow cloning and what is deep cloning. So here we'll do an example of shallow cloning and deep cloning. So this example is of shallow cloning. So you see over here we are doing class student and then we are doing implements clonable. And then inside a constructor we are passing all the data members which are roll number, name and subject. Fine. After that over here you can see we are having a clone method. We have made this method as public. Then return type we have kept it as object and then clone method which throws clone not supported exception. So you see in this method we are simply doing super.clone and we are returning the object returned from super.clone. Okay, so this will do a shallow cloning, that means it will copy all your primitive types. Fine. But here we are also having a class or an object of a class subject. Fine. So if we do shallow cloning, so this subject of a class, subject will not get copied. Rather, it will be shared between the cloned object and the original object. Fine. So when in main, when we are calling, when we have created a student S1 and then we are creating S2. So S2 we are creating calling clone method on S1. So when we are doing S1.clone, so the new object that is returned S2 will actually have different row numbers, name, but the subject will be shared. Why so? Because we are doing simply super.clone, which is a shallow cloning. Okay, so you see over here we have printed the row number, name and subject of S1 and S2. After that we are changing the S2 name to Amit, okay, and S2 subject to maths. Fine. Initially the name was Amit and the subject was English. Fine. Now let's move forward and let's print it out after update S2 dot row number, S2 dot name and S2 dot subject. Fine. And okay, now let's see what will be the output. Well, you see these two lines are printed. So these two lines are printed as a result of this line and this line. So S1 and S2 are exactly having the same. But what is the output for this line? What will be the output of change? So S2 dot row number will remain as same, which was S1 dot row number, which is 101. Then S2 dot name, which we have also changed to Amit, but the original name was also Amit, so that's why it will print Amit over here. And when we do S2 dot subject, then it will print math since we have changed it to math. Okay, but what if we try to print S1 dot subject? What do you think will be the output? Well, that will also be changed to maths because we are doing a shallow copy. So the subject object will be shared between S1 and S2. We'll see that live shortly. Now let's see and read in detail how shallow copy works. Well, shallow copy is a bitwise copy of an object. The new object is created that has an exact copy of the values in the original object. If any fields of the object are references to the other object, just the reference address are copied and only the memory address is copied. Okay, so I hope so you got it. So over here you can see in the diagram we are having a main object 1 and main object 2. So considering main object 1 is the original object and main object 2 is a cloned object, then let's say main object 1 was having two things. One was feed1, that was a primitive type, and it was also containing another object of a particular class, that was contain object, okay, 1. Then when we cloned it, then the main object 2 will have its own copy of feed1 which is copied into feed2. So the values of feed1 and feed2 will be same because we did cloning. But what about contain object 1? Well, only the memory address of contain object 1 got shared or got copied into main 2. So now what happens? the main object 1 is also having the same address and main object 2 is also referring to the same memory address. So if both are referring to the same memory address, both are having the same copied memory address, then that means both of them actually refer to the same object, since that memory address locate to a particular object called contain object 1. So that's the reason the contain object 1 is shared between main object 1 and main object 2 in case of shallow copy. Fine. So this was the concept of shallow copy. Now let's see the concept how deep copy works. Well, a deep copy copies all the fields and make copies of dynamically allocated pointed by the fields. Okay. So what happens is it makes copy of all the memory pointed by the fields, and deep copy occurs when an object is copied along with the object which it refers to. So over here, the main object 1 is the original and main object 2 is clone. So you see field 1 and contain object 1 was the fields or the data members for main object 1. Now when it is cloned, the main object 2 contains a copy of field 1 in field 2. Okay. Similarly, the contain object is also copied and kept in contain object 2. So in this case, the memory address is not just copied, rather the whole object is copied. So the new copy of the whole object is built up and is assigned to main object 2, which is clone of main object 1. So this is called deep copy. In deep copy, everything including the object which it refers to get copied. Okay. So this is a program of deep cloning. You can see here we have implemented clonable, and then we are having a constructor of student. So it's the same example, it's just that we are doing a deep copy. Okay, so you just come to this clone method. Over here, just see, we are doing student s equals to new student and we are passing row number, name and subject. Okay, and then we are returning s. So row number, name and subject will be of the, the original object that we are copying, and a new object will be created which is s and which will be returned. Okay, so this is how deep cloning is done. So over here you can see we are not using super dot clone, so that's why we are not using try catch, and that's why we are not throwing clone not supported exception. Okay, we are actually simply creating a new object using a constructor. Okay, in this deep cloning example. So what will be the output for this? Well, the output would be the original object would be 101 Amit English, and the clone object would be 101 Amit English. Now if we just update the original object, okay, so the original object after it is updated, let's say we change the name to Ram and subject to math, so your original object will become 101 Ram and math. Fine. But your cloned object will remain unimpacted and it will still remain 101 Amit and English. Fine, so this is how deep copy works. And yes, there is an alternative way for deep copy, that is serialization. What does serialization do? Well, it writes out the whole object graph into a persistent store and reads it back when needed. Okay, which means you will get a copy of whole object graph when you read it back. This is exactly what you want when you deep copy an object. Okay. Note, when you deep copy through serialization, you should make sure that all the classes in the object graph are serialized. Okay. So what it is saying is you can also do serialization. How it is done, we'll study that when we'll be, covering files in our Java. So we'll be studying serialization along with that. But as of now, it's an alternative way of deep copy in which you actually store the whole object and reads it back whenever required. Okay. So, well, this is an example in which we are doing a serialization. So I'm, going through that example. If it is not 100% clear, it's okay, as we'll be covering serialization again when we'll be doing files and streams in Java. Okay. Okay guys, so we need to firstly implement serializable interface, and then let's assume we have getter, setters and constructor over here. And then in the main method, we are actually doing object output stream, creating the object of object output stream and object input stream. And then we have created an object of colored circle C1 and then C2 also, but we have assigned null to C2. After that, we are doing a deep copy using serialization. How we are doing? You can see we have created an object of byte array output stream, and we are passing that to our object output stream. So when we do that to serialize the object, we use the method write object. So we are actually writing a object C1 using our object output stream to the bytes. Okay. And whenever we do that, we have to flush it out using flush method. After that, whenever we need to retrieve our object, we can retrieve it using our input stream object and using the read object method. So whenever we do read object, we can store it in the C2, and the value of C2 will be exactly same as C1. So it is actually the deep copy of C1. That is, we are doing to serialization. Okay. So this will be the output that we get. This is the original, and you can see the copied is also having the same value. And then if you try to change the original, the copied will remain unimpacted. Okay. Fine guys, now let's do a quick example in our Eclipse IDE. So let's open our Eclipse IDE. So here I'm creating a source folder in my project, and the source folder name that I'm giving is simply cloning. And now inside the source folder, let me create a package over here. Let me give a simple name com.cloning, and now let me do an example. So first of all, let's create an example of shallow cloning. So I'm doing shallow clone demo. Fine. Inside the shallow clone demo, let me firstly create another class where I'll be, doing a cloning. So my class name would be class student, and let me implement clonable. Fine. So see, in our Eclipse IDE, as soon as we implement a marker interface, and now we need to implement or override our clone method. Before that, let me create some of the things in this. Let me create an integer, which is row number. Let me create a string, which is name. And then let me create a class, another class object. Let me create an object of address class addr. Okay. And let me also create this object class. Okay, let me create this class as address over here. Fine, and let address have int street number. Okay, just to keep it simplified, I'm simply keeping one variable, and just to, because over here we are more concentrating on cloning, so that's why I just come straight away to the clone method. So my clone method will be public, and since it will return the student object, so let me return student and clone. Fine. Add a return type. Okay. Now let me call super dot clone. Okay. And let me return whatever super dot clone is returning. So super dot clone will return me an object which will be of the type from which its method is called. Since I'll be calling it from a student object, so it will returning me a student type. So since I'm calling super.clone, so it's saying add cast to student or change the method return type to object. So let me add cast to student instead of returning the method type, and I need to also surround it with try catch to throw clone not supported exception. And now let's see, it is saying add a return statement. Okay, it's fine. Firstly, it will actually return it from here, and if the exception occurred, then I'm returning null, so it's fine. Okay. So I've implemented my clone method. Now let's try to create an object of student over here, and over here firstly let me create a main method. Now I'll create the student object. Okay. Now let's since I haven't made these as private, just for simplicity. Ideally you should make your data members as private. Just for simplicity, I'm kind of assigning it over here only. Or rather, I think it would be a better idea if I make a constructor and pass the three things over there. So I'm making a constructor over here. And I'm actually assigning all the values. So I think that is clear because that is something we have done it multiple times. And now let me pass my row number, which would I'm passing as 2, and the name I'm passing it as Sam, and the address that I'm passing it as is 101 Street. Okay. And since my address is not a string but there are object, I should rather pass it as an object. So let me do it as new address, and for that I have to create a constructor in address also. So let me create a constructor for the class address in order to take a int street number, and then assign street number. Oh, I'm doing I think a lot of spell mistake these days. Yeah, it's cool. Now let's go back and change it to a integer. Yeah, it's fine now. So a student object has been created. So far we have created a simple student object. Let me name it as student1. Now let me create another object which is student2. And let me call the clone method of student1 through student1 object. So if I do that, the clone method will return me a new object of student2. Okay. Now let's print this object. First let me print it over here. So what I'm doing is I'm printing student1. So will it work like this? Well, no. If I want to, simply print the student like this, I need to override toString method of the object class. So let me do that because, in SOP, I don't want to explicitly print roll number, name, and address. I want to simply write student1 and I want everything to be printed. So let me override toString method. Now let's return something from it. Let's return the three things that we want to. So I'm printing name over here, then I'm printing row number, and then I'll be printing the third one is address. Now for address I want to print actually the street number. Okay. Once we have created student S2 also, student2, let me print student2 as well. Okay. Now let's run our program. So if we just run our program, currently we are doing a shallow copy and we are not changing anything, we are simply copying it out. So I think for both of them, I should get the same output. So yeah, I can see we're having exact same output for both of them. Fine. Now let's try to change something. Okay. Firstly, let me just improve a bit of spacing over here so you can clearly see that. Fine. Now let me change something. Okay, let me change firstly the S1. So for student 1, let me change the roll number to 1, which is initially 2, and let me change the student 1 name to Peter, and then Let me also change the address for student 1. Okay. Now if I have to change the address for student 1, how can I do that? Well, either I could create a new object, or what else I could do is, can I simply change the address by passing a integer? Well, for doing that, let me do it this way, because over here, since address is an object, so I need to change it to an object. So what I'm doing is I'm changing the value dot street number equals to 106. Okay. Now let's print both of these things again. Okay. So I have changed student S1. So that's why I'm printing student 1 and student 2 again. And let me just to clarify, do it after change. Now let's run our program. So you see, before change everything is same, but after change, for student 1 the name is changed to Peter, but for S2 the name remains same to Sam. Then row number is changed to 1, but for Sam the row number is still 2. Okay. Then the address for the Peter that we have changed is to 106. But you can see for Sam also the address is changed to 106. Why so? Because we are actually, sharing the same copy. Same copy means we are actually sharing the memory address, but the object is actually being shared, not copied. So the same object ADDR is getting shared between Sam and Peter. Okay. So that is something that we are doing. Okay, so let me, instead of doing it from the street number, let me, assign a new address to our um, first student 1. So if I do that, what do you think would be the output? So over here you can see that Sam's address remains unimpacted. Why so? Because we are actually changing the object itself in S1. So since we have changed the object, but the Sam will still remain unaltered because it is pointing to the previous object. So rather, we should not change the object, since we are changing the value. We should rather change the value of street number. Fine. So this is how shallow copy works. Now let's do an example of deep cloning. So I hope so shallow cloning is quite clear from this example how it is impacted. Okay. Now let me create another class for deep cloning. So I'm going to new and I'm going to create an example deep cloning. Just in case of a best interest of time, I'm going to copy some code from shallow cloning example. Why so? Just to save the time, nothing else. And there is no benefit of rewriting the same code. So currently I'm copying the whole code. So right now in the deep cloning demo I've copied exact same code for shallow cloning. So right now it will work exactly as shallow cloning. But for deep cloning we need to make some changes. Okay. So it's saying it's already defined in the same package. So let me as of now just take all the code and comment it out. Fine. So now deep cloning is fine. Okay. So now I need to make some changes for deep cloning. What are changes I need to make? In our previous example, you see when we are actually changing the street number to 106, the street number for Sam also got changed. So I'm just rerunning the code to show you the output. So you see, although I changed the address for Peter, but for Sam also the address got changed. Why so? Because they are sharing the object. So in shallow cloning, the objects are shared. So the copy of the internal objects, that is the object contained, are not done. Rather, the references are shared. But in deep cloning, we can actually copy that too also. How to do that? Well, for that we need to make slight changes in the clone method. So when we are doing super.clone, it's fine if we do super.clone, fine, because that will anyway take care of the primitive type. But what about the address type? For address type, we have to explicitly write down and create a object. Okay, so you can see what we are doing is we are actually creating a new object, and for to pass the street number we are actually copying the street number from addr. Let me reset the address property to addr1, the new address that I have created, and now let me return s2. Fine, so you see I have made a small change where I have explicitly copied the address object by creating a new address for deep cloning. You can see that the address for the Sam remain unimpacted, although I changed the address for Peter 206, which was my first object, but for my second object where the name was Sam, where I changed, where the name of the second object was Sam, the address still remains as 101 since we deep copied it. So the objects that the student is having will also be copied. Fine. So this is the difference between deep cloning and shallow cloning. I hope so it's clear to you how to do deep cloning and shallow cloning. Fine. So yes. So thank you guys. This was about cloning, and let's meet you in the next tutorial. Thank you.